Good morning. It's Tuesday, May 23rd. And this morning I want to talk about the debt ceiling. And I want to mention not what happened at yesterday's meeting and everything, because I haven't really followed that closely yet. But I do want to mention that some of the things that Biden says are true, and some of the things that McCarthy is doing are probably also okay. And Biden is claiming that the Republicans are making a big deal out of the debt ceiling and holding it up and putting in all of these conditions to make him look bad for the 2024 election. And I think that's 100% true. On the other hand, I think that Joe's position left him open for this attack when he took this no conditional deal. I don't want any conditions thrown upon us. I want a straight deal on raising the debt ceiling, no parameters. And I think that was a bad approach also. Having said that, what I really want to talk about this morning is how we spend our money, okay? Because that's a clear-cut indication of what's really the problem in this situation and why we're constantly up against this debt ceiling. Now, in order to gather this information, I had to wade through several pages of Wikipedia. And this is what I found. The first thing we must understand about the U.S. government spending is that the federal government only spends 55% of the money. The remaining 45% is spent by state and local government. They get that money from the federal government. And there are schnorrer states that get more money from the federal government than they contribute to the federal government. Kentucky being one of those states. And there are certain mandatory entitlement spendings and some discretionary spendings, and then there's interest on the government debt. And all of that goes into the picture. Now, there are some categories that generate income, like the U.S. Postal Service, for instance. So whatever you're contributing to the U.S. Postal Service is supposedly be offset by the money that it brings in through stamps and other payments to it. So we have to disclose and discard some of that spending too, in terms of how much we're really outlaying each and every month or year or whatever way you want to measure this, okay? Now, the money that's spent is basically broken down into two categories. There's the mandatory spending category, which is represented in Figure A at the end of this talk. So when I finish talking, if you have an opportunity, spend a few minutes, stop the recording, spend a few minutes, look at Figure A to see exactly how much money goes all over. The mandatory spending category includes Social Security, financial support for the elderly, health care, that's Medicare and Medicaid, that's insurance for the elderly, again the elderly, and health insurance for low-income individuals, the Medicaid. And then there's income security, disability assistance, food and nutrition assistance. That's called supplemental security income, right? There's earned income tax credits, there's child tax credits. Then we got veterans benefits, which I consider extremely important and which is often overlooked and underutilized. And then you've got agriculture and energy and general government services and international affairs. And I can't go through every one of these things in minute detail. But if you look at Figure A, you will see everything laid out for you. And Figure A represents about $4.1 trillion. So that's a breakdown of the mandatory government spending categories. And that particular chart was probably a year or two old. So Figure A suggests that Social Security is the single largest mandatory spending item, taking up about 38% or nearly 1 billion of the 2.7 billion total, etc. So just look at figure A and you can see the kind of spending that goes on in the mandatory category. The mandatory category represents roughly about $4.1 trillion of the total U.S. spending budget. And now we come to the major portion of our budget, of our debt. And that's discretionary spending. And discretionary spending is optional spending that is determined by Congress each year through an annual appropriations process. And that's what we're going through right now. And I don't have to go through the participants, the President versus Congress and the Senate. We don't have to talk about that. Let's just recognize that the largest piece of discretionary spending is on defense. That's about 50% of what we spend. And then we got transportation and education. Education includes primary, elementary school, K through 12, as they call it, right? And then there's other veterans benefits and public health and law enforcement, natural resources and science and housing assistance and community services and foreign affairs and other expenditures, right? And then what I will call figure B provides a snapshot of the major discretionary government spending categories, right? And as the figure suggests, 50% of the spending is attributed to national defense. And we never budge off national defense. So when the fight is going on now between Biden and McCarthy, defense never comes into the picture. What comes into the picture is primarily some of the areas of mandatory spending and maybe some of the areas of public health or law enforcement or something like that. But it's very tricky on what to cut and what not to cut and how much to spend and what kind of emergency fund do we need left behind. So as you can see by those two charts, we are spending a lot of money in a lot of different places. And I can say honestly that we need to do something about our current tax structure to make it easier to make decisions. The tax cut that was instituted in the Trump administration was a big mistake. So I hope that this information about the budget puts a different light on the picture as to where we're spending our money and why we should be spending it and how we should be spending it. And it's something that we can easily get together with if we want to. So I leave you with that this morning. Have a great day. Bye.